Hello, Alex.
How's it
How are
going, Ben?
you?
I was like, do we have to say
Thank you.
yo or like what is the introduction here?
I need to come up with some kind of catchy intro. This is number 32, and I still haven't thought of one. So if you have like a suggestion, feel free, mate. Feel
Whenever I
free.
hear people say yos, I'm always like, they've come down with the case of the yos. So,
Yeah.
I'm still the hello. How are you?
Yeah. So like, hey, how you doing? And it's like, I need something cool. Thanks for joining, mate. Much appreciated. Very nice to
Oh
have you
no, this is
here.
awesome.
Alex M. Powers. So, I'll avoid any jokes about you having a really appropriate surname. I suppose you've heard them all 10 times per week, maybe. I'm not sure.
Sometimes it works out pretty well in my favor, especially when I used to do a lot more Power Platform stuff, where it was just
Yeah,
like every product they named after me. But now I'm siloed into Power BI again. So,
yeah, I get. I was when I got my current job. The guy who ran the team back in the day, he said that my email address really helped my application because it was just Ben
um,
at Power BI guy. It's like, yeah, that was helpful. Fair enough. So. Andy, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself? Do a quick intro before we get going. If people who
of
don't know who
course.
you are, yeah.
Of course. So Alex Powers, Senior Program Manager here on the Power BI Customer Advisory team. So working very closely kind of with Adam Saxton, Patrick LeBlanc, Matthew Roach, Chris Hamill. He's my buddy for quick chats. It's always that you have 2 minutes and it turns into the hour. So always just thinking up weird, wild things. And of course, working with Chris Webb on the data integration side. So a lot of my efforts on the team kind of focused on building customer community and then also just the data integration aspect. So Power Query Online, data flows, and then of course anywhere where Power Query is now found. So I absolutely love that it's showing up in more and more places across the Microsoft space.
Very cool. And it's a very interesting time, exciting time for Power Query showing up in new places. No, we've anyone
Yeah.
who is watching Build will be aware of that, or just follows Power BI in any way because it's been the talk of everything. Data mart, data capital D, capital M. Don't know how to spell it yet. Is it data mart or data marts? I don't know.
It is Mart, so
Mart.
no plural, and then it is lowercase unless it is at the beginning of a sentence.
Oh, okie
So
dokie. Good to
it
know.
does not fit with anything else though. Like data flows has an S, data sets has an S. It's its own thing. It's blazing its own trail.
Absolutely. But I mean, maybe they'll just change the name in a year and stick the S on there just to make out the documentation wrong, you know?
Power BI service lowercase s. Every time I see it on a PowerPoint slide, I'm always like, oh, that person, they got it wrong. And product team does it too. So I
Yeah.
kind of laugh at that.
The person who did it probably also spells PowerPoint wrong, because I always forget which P's in PowerPoint should be capitalized. It's a whole thing. It's okay.
Then
As long
Power
as
Pivot had a space at one time, and I think now it's like breathing. So it's just, oh, space, no space. I do love the question here. How many people on the cat team?
That is a good question.
Honestly, I looked the other day from one of the lists that Adam put together for Twitter, and it was like 23 plus. We're probably going to be adding about 5 more members here very shortly. Met a new team member today, and absolutely excited to kind of just see us growing more and more in that aspect. But always growing. And of course, if it's something you'd love to join in the future, keep an eye out for the careers.microsoft.com.
Oh man, I can't seriously, Jeff. How many cats in the people team? Love it. Love it. So when you mentioned all those names before, but it was a very mightily impressive list, I have to say. Just scrolling off this person. I was like, wow, they are the minds that will get stuff done. No,
We have so many great people here that like don't have a big social presence too. I'll say like in the aspect of like 250,000 followers like Adam, right? So Benny is incredible. Rui, Gabby from kind of the European team, a guy who I absolutely just am in love with now, Aki in Japan. He's a huge Power Query fan. He wants to Power Query everything.
Nice.
So I'm just like, yes. So we're always nerding out in kind of the background.
If it basically is Power Query, you love it. You get excited by it. I don't want to miss one thing, by the way. I mentioned that the last thing I saw before we started this live stream was your shirt, which is fantastic. Look at that shirt.
It's summer.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we don't do awards, but if you did, you'd win it for best shirt. I've got to say, it's a thing of beauty.
Best dressed by sure, or by far.
So, mate, as you said, Power Query is your thing. That's kind of what you're focused on. That's what you're. Why is Power Query awesome? Why is Power
So
Query awesome?
I come from the Excel background and very much like VBA. So like anyone who probably found VBA or stumbled into it, it was the record button, and then at the very end of it, you'd have this like 600 line thing to like copy a cell from like A1 to A2, and you're like, what is all this nonsense? So eventually, like you start going through the language, figuring it out, you know, doing all the automation, of course, the data transformations too, that kind of comes with automation as your brain starts thinking about more and more things. But I was reading the book, M is for Data Monkey from Ken Poles, and then obviously Miguel Escobar. I went back to my desk one day and it was that moment where I was like, screw this Power Query thing. I don't want to touch it anymore. I'll just run back to VBA. And in that moment, I caught myself then and I said, I'm going to figure this thing out with Power Query.
Cool.
And I'd never looked back ever since.
Very nice.
So writing VBA probably, 40 hours a week into maybe writing VBA for like 2 minutes a year, if even that. So that's where I was just like, this is incredible. Really dug in, especially at that time where Power Query didn't have IntelliSense. Any language, resources were purely just the M is for Data Monkey book, and then also the language specification guide, which is a PDF document, the driest thing that you've ever read, but it was incredible. I would recommend everyone to go read it. It's in docs form now, but if you can stand about 4 hours of technical specifications, your mind will be blown away. But it's very dry and boring.
Okay.
That's my disclaimer there.
That sounds like quite a chance. Dry and boring, but worth it. Stick with it is what you're trying to say.
Yep.
Okay. Link it, mate, and we'll look for it. Here's a question. What's this? Did you ever own a copy of Professional VBA Development? I don't know what that means.
I would say yes, Jeff, and I believe that is from John Walkenbach, who I am a huge fan of. I love everything that John does, and I mean, we could spend like the entire hour talking about this topic of like, John was a Microsoft MVP. He was not afraid to show you the deep end of dry, technical, boring topics. It was not, who was it? Who wrote the Professional VBA?
I love it.
Help me out there in the chat, but I love books that are like 900 pages that are dry and boring. I love it. At the end of it, whenever you close that chapter out, you're like, that was, just such a rewarding experience to lift 50 pounds and finally put it on the bookshelf.
Just having to dumb sense. I feel like they're just going to try and wind you up, mate,
VS Code, please use it. I want more people to fall in love with that, so then that way they'll incorporate that version of it into the product.
Yeah. I mean, it's okay. We're aware of its flaws, right? But yeah, it could be better. I was thinking because I've probably mentioned before at some point regarding Power Query and its presence and where you can see it. I was happy to see it, of course, when you open something data mart, it says there quite clearly Power Query, because I was starting to have this worry that Power Query in essence might disappear, not what you can do with Power Query, but just the word Power Query, obviously that, because people, when they use Power BI, they very rarely mention Power Query. They'll say, open the query editor, which annoys me. It annoys me.
5 seconds to sign up, 5 minutes to wow. Where do you think that first 5 minutes is spent? It's in Power Query.
Yeah,
everyone loves it.
No, they use it, but they don't call it Power Query. They call it the query. I'm going to open the query editor. Everyone uses Power Query, but I always think, will the term Power Query disappear? Because that was a shame for me, because it kind of takes away from how powerful and awesome. I love Power Query. It's awesome. I started my journey into Power BI through Power Query when I found it somewhere in Excel.
Yeah, and I love the chat and kind of their comments here too. Like if we were to look back at the history, getting transform when it was called that for a short minute there in Excel. Agree with Dan here. Transform data, not the Power Query editor button. So even whenever you open it up, it's just called Query Editor, Transform Data. It doesn't really say anywhere that it's Power Query. I do hear people say, I'm using Power BI, but really the thing that they're trying to use is Power Query. So
yeah.
Should we break it out? Should it be its own standalone product? What are we thinking here?
It could be. It could be its own standalone product. It's got its own Twitter handle, so why not, right?
But they don't follow me. That's like the biggest thing.
That is so. Are you serious? That's so rude. That is just
We're going to start a
ridiculous.
campaign though after today's stream. Like July 15th is my birthday. We're going to make that the day that they follow me.
That would be
I need the
awesome.
collective energy of the community to all band together on this.
It's a call to action. Get it done. Power query to follow Alex. That's bizarre, strange. But yeah, it should be standalone product. I mean, at the very least, it should. I mean, it's very hard to find in Excel, right?
Yeah, I mean that's where it's like tough. If you're using Excel online and you accidentally click on the data tab now, it will like prompt you with some of these notifications. Toast notifications is the official word. So do I think that we'll probably see some toast notifications in Excel in the future? Maybe. Thinking about Excel just as a whole, like 95% of Excel users only use 5% of the application. They're still not even using basic tables or pivot tables. Like Power Queries so far. I don't know.
But this is the thing also I find interesting with Power Query, because it's so far, but to do complex things, as you well know, it's very straightforward. So yes, people consider it's like an extension, it's an add-on, it's something else. But if you just click on that button once, it will change your life, you know?
Oh yeah, big time. I mean, I've got my mom power querying things, so, she'll hit me up on our dinner night for the week, and she's like, I need to actually do a little bit of power query work with you. So it's like, I just wanted to eat some tacos and hang out. But
class. Power query, yeah, publicist, exactly. And the same thing. This is, the question is why the majority of Excel users don't know about its existence. It's a fair point. I think with my stance on that is that people have been using Excel for so long, and it's difficult to try and get people to try new things in an existing program.
It's the application of 35 years of history. So if people have developed how far that they're willing to take the application, and it gets the job done, then that may be as far as they're willing to invest. Like they're probably not going to go buy the dry, boring book. They're probably not going to watch a live stream like this. They're probably not going to find a community or attend a conference. It's purely just the application in which to get the job done, which is fine. Like we have people out there that need tools. So, but could you imagine if people went from 5% to 6% of the application, if they knew that much more about it? Like, wow, like their productivity could be through the roof.
Absolutely.
It's just cool to think about.
It's when you see trainings that don't incorporate Power Query for Excel. This is that always gets me. It's like even a basic training, because I maintain that Power Query is actually a basic element of Excel. It's not a complex. I mean, it's so much easier to do. I mean, it asked me to write a complex formula in Excel. I'm like, no, thank you.
Yep. I told my mom the other day, I was like, you could either use Power Query X lookup. Unfortunately, she ended up at X lookup. I still shiver. But she was like, tell that Leela friend of yours on YouTube, if people know Leela's trading, she's like, tell her she did a great job. It's like, well, I don't know her personally, but I do know that she's awesome.
That's cool. Here's an interesting one. How come there's no Power Query requirement? I can't say Power Query, by the way. How come there's no Power Query requirement in the MO200?
That's interesting. So Andy, I'll ask back to you. So I am MOS 2010 and 2013 certified. As far as 2013, there was some Power Pivot. I don't recall any Power Query though. Is there still any type of BI flavor, maybe within the 200 or 201 exams? Or is it strictly just kind of the grid? Let us know in the chat.
Yeah. Update us, please. In the meantime, I'm going to take a step back a second, and I should have asked this at the very start. Why is it not about the cell? I don't. What's that about?
There's a great kind of a write-up from Excel.tv when they asked me about this too. I'll kind of share it with the community. But a buddy of mine, he was talking about a great work of fiction from Lance Armstrong. So if anyone knows him, he was the guy who did all these bike races, and he told this incredible farce. All of it was a lie. He was doping the entire time, but he said the book of his is called "It's Not About the Bike," and none of it was about bicycle racing. So I was like, that's such a cool title. And when I want people to if you've ever been to my website, which was more Excel focused, it was very much, I don't want to teach you about Excel. I want to teach you about why this thing worked the way that it did. Like when you type in A1 and you type in the value 10, like what are all the background operations that are occurring So I always like the deep end kind of technical content. So if you ever asked me to like write about a VLOOKUP, it would turn into like a 20-page dissertation. So it's just not, it's not healthy. That's why I don't blog anymore.
That's fair enough. Oh, you get too deep down and too stuck into it, and now that's it.
Rob said the same thing from over at Power Pivot or P3 nowadays, P3 Adaptive. He's like, it's just not healthy for me to blog. And I was like, I know exactly how that feels. And everyone's doing video these days, so that's how people enjoy consuming content.
Say that, but I get a lot of people saying that they learn a lot better from blog posts than videos. Everyone's different, but yeah, I thought at some point, oh, maybe I could just like I'll do the video, and then like, no, I can barely do video, so it's not even worth trying. I'm not sure. I think with blogs, I kind of there's like 3 or 4 that I learn more from, and the rest is just Googling it, and whatever the first one comes up, I'll take that. Whether it's a video or a blog, it just doesn't matter anymore.
Well, I mean, Bing is an alternative too that you could use. You know,
I always say Google, and I really should start saying Bing. You know what I mean? Just to get that. Well, it might not be true, but I should say it.
Yeah, to me, it's like funny because I love reading the content. I think I just like hate creating it. But I'm also of like the Power BI, I'll say like era, and maybe like others here too can chime in. But I came up through the Edx courses, which was done by Will Thompson and Amanda Kofsky. A lot of that was like 14 hours of material, and was, you know, self-paced in terms of I could consume something, I could like fumble my way through it, I could eventually figure it out. And this is like a big discussion I'm having too with like different community members. But dashboard in a day, I love the comment that they made is like report in a rush. It's like I try and get you to learn Power Query, Power Pivot from the analysis services side. The reporting all within 8 hours, then also the service. I see a lot more foundational people who have gone the Edx course as opposed to those who are only rushed through this 6 or 7 hours. So I'd be curious, like, what was your experience of finding and learning Power BI, Ben?
I also did the EDX, to be honest. I mean, for the most part, I would say for the first year, I was self-taught. Whether that was a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. I found it, I connected to data, and I did all this stuff, and I just did everything that I could. Of course, I did some internet searches to see what I could learn. But yeah, and then I did EDX to test it because I wanted to recommend stuff for colleagues after I'd been doing the trainings. I also wanted to see myself, recognizing that I was going to have weird gaps in my knowledge because there's some stuff that I knew, like because I started with Power Query and because some of the initial work that I'd done was web scraping, I learned how to do like custom functions like really quickly. So some of the stuff that I knew was more advanced, but the other stuff, it was just like really like these basic gaps. So this was not many. I did dashboard in a day as well, actually, in Berlin with a colleague. I would say that I found the self-paced courses more helpful than the dashboard in the day things, because I think you're more likely to kind of go back to it and keep learning, whereas dashboard in a day, you're likely to do it and then just maybe not pick it up for a while,
I think it's more long-term success, where like you had kind of said, like you're incrementally building these things. I learned, Power Query from Excel. I learned Power Pivot from Excel. So when I got Power BI in my hands, I was like, oh, well, I already know these 60% of the application. Now it's just like the visualization layer, which is awesome because I had that like benefit. But for everyone else who's never touched Power Query or never touched Power Pivot, like we just discussed in Excel, to give them all of these different components all at once and then say, well, go forward and learn. Well, which part do I learn? Like you have to learn all of it, which is difficult. And, nights, weekends, they really have to put in the work, but that's a lot to ask of people.
It is. Sorry, there are lots of comments here. I'm trying to I'm very bad at keeping up with the comments. I think really at the end of the day, you have to have a project. You need to go with that project. You can't just learn, but also if you want to get to a decent level at some speed, or in general, really, you can't do it all at work. You have to put in personal time. There's no way you can get to, I think, a reasonable level.
That's tough asking people for personal time. Like for me, like
It's not an expectation in any way. I don't think it's an expectation, but I don't think it's if you're learning at work, tends to be you've got other tasks to do, you know? And unless you're very lucky to be in a position where your boss has said, okay, or you just have time to just go through and do a few hours a week, or can you use the tool?
so I was on a reporting team and like just fantastic kind of people with different backgrounds. So like some were Microsoft Access, I was kind of Excel, and we're all kind of like learning some of the deeper aspects together. As long as we had all of our deliveries out, like at the later half of the day, it was purely focused on uh, you know hopefully designing something for the next group with tech specs, or it was just like literally me sitting there with a book and just like reading. So I would just like read these 900-page Excel books,
Yeah.
but that was on the job, and that was not during my own nights and weekends, which I see a lot within like the Power BI communities, like feature fatigue and just having to keep up with like learning all this stuff all the time. And I'm very much like, you should take a step back and like breathe and like go hang out, look at a tree, whatever it is.
Absolutely. I don't think it's something. I mean, now I don't do it. Now I do it outside work if I want to. I mean, like this also isn't my work time. I'm chatting, I'm learning stuff, and I go on websites because I choose to do that. But certainly the first year, it was quite a lot of later. It was, and I know that was just me personally. And I mentioned it to when I did one of these a few months ago. I said when I started using Power BI, Power Query and Power BI, I've never had such a bad review from a boss than I did at that time.
Really?
Because I was focused on, I did my job, but I did the core of my job, and all the other parts that I like, the extension parts, like maybe could try and get involved. I didn't do. I just did learn a Power Query, and I did all the Power BI trainings. But my boss was not interested in those things, so I got quite a negative review. It paid off in the end, of course, long term.
Yeah.
But I think, what Alex said is also quite, depends on whether your goal is to do your job or to be a world-class Power BI expert. If you want to be in the second group, you're probably going to need to do a bit of your own time. I mean, unfortunately, I did that time. I'm by no means a world-class Power BI expert. However, I take a point. I agree with that. It's if you want to use Power BI and create reports, you can do it in your job time for sure.
I love the second half. I agree on like the Power BI expert doesn't have to be like a thing. But I worked in jobs where they didn't use Power BI and I wanted to use it. So I left those jobs and I found different things that allowed me to do the thing that I was investing all of my time and efforts into. I think like now is like hopefully a great time in the market, just from like a jumping jobs perspective. And I just saw an awesome thing from like the Power BI princess out there here recently where she talked about just her salary range increasing and changing. But I still remember when it was like one Power BI job trickling in on a job board like every couple months. And then like
that's true.
a year later, it was like maybe a couple. And then still like employers writing, looking for business intelligence analysts. Well, which product are you use? Like I would start interviewing them and they'd be like, well, we don't use like, Tableau or Power BI or, any of the market leaders. They're like, maybe it's the BI product from 10 or 15 years ago, where maybe it's just simply Excel is how they kind of spruce it up just to match the job titles. But always be selfish. I would encourage people, like, if you want to use this thing and you're investing all these hours into it and the job isn't giving you that fulfillment, like, whew, the market is yours.
Yeah. I completely agree. I mean, now it's, what I was talking about when it was back in very early 2017, 2016. So then,
nobody.
To be fair to my boss, she just didn't know the program or what it's capable of or how much time it would save or that, we would be going in that direction, So it's understandable to an extent, which it was for me frustrating. So I felt that I couldn't do as much as I wanted to. But now it's a different story, of course, because it's everywhere, right?
Same company for you? Or did you leave that company?
I left that company. I left the company about 3 years ago. And,
gotcha.
That was the correct decision. So you mentioned the other thing. Maybe it's a good time to ask this question. What is LookML?
Oh my goodness. So I did a brief stint as a Looker developer. So Looker is the Google product. So within that, like I was like, yeah, I'll try and be a BI developer within the market. Still doing Power BI, but this is the product that this organization was using. So at that point, LookML is their language for that product, which is very interesting because first you have to write SQL and then you have to write LookML on top of SQL to get data into the application. So I was like, why do I have to write two languages to get data from my mindset of like, click button, get data. And you're like, yeah, Alex, but Power Query, you're using two languages with Ev and then connecting to a SQL database. Like, of course, my argument doesn't hold up. But very interesting language. I will give them credit in that they were a code first BI solution. In the sense of if you're a professional developer, it has Git integration built in, so you can do kind of the rollbacks, a lot of the CI/CD. But my struggle, I'll be honest with you, Ben, was like there was no community.
Yeah.
I tried to do an internet search and I couldn't get answers on how to do this thing, which is why I'm always like, find a community. I don't care if you're upset. If you're happy with the product, like if you are there and I know that you're out there making noise, then that tells me that there's a healthy product and people are like trying to figure this stuff out together. Their Reddit was purely employees. Their community forum was purely employees. Like it was difficult for me to solve problems.
Yeah.
And that's so tough.
And as you mentioned before, and that's actually interesting because if I think about, obviously we know, everyone here knows the strength of the Power BI community and what that brings. That's obviously something that now that Microsoft leans into, the Power BI team, they lean into that. Of course, it's
now
used.
Why do you think that?
Sorry?
Why do you think now? I feel like they've been doing it for years through technical forums, conferences.
That was going to be that was exactly my question. So because obviously I've only ever been involved in the Power BI community. I've never been involved in any or Power Query,
Yep.
So that was my question. Was it something that was from the very start? It was like an intentional thing. Let's get this thing going by building up a community, or it's interesting to see how that developed,
Yeah. Being from the outside, like I'm still newer to Microsoft. I'll be coming up on 3 years tomorrow.
Nice. Congratulations.
My path was through the community. Like
yeah.
I wrote a blog. I started showing up to user groups because I was the 184th best Excel blogger in the world, but nobody knew me. So I'm like, well, let me go to like local SQL Server groups and talk about this Power BI thing, which was starting to take off in their community. They loved me just as a weird and kind of a fun presenter, as opposed to like a typical, and I'll say like SQL Server can be boring topics. But I've seen like everyone's coming together now. Everyone's having fun together. I think a lot of this is also just like cloud in the sense of it's no longer boxed releases of, well, here's 2016's version or here's 2019, and you now have 3 years to go learn it and develop it before the next release. It's, oh crap, I need to learn all of this all of the time. And just like don't overwhelm yourself and find people that are interesting. Like I see Sandeep in the audience today here. He is the AI guy for me. Any question I have about AI in the product, I look at him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Johnny Winter here with a lot of his stuff too. But
yeah, no, actually, I think I'm not sure. I think Sandeep the other day posted on Twitter, and I thought it was a perfect example. Sandeep, if it wasn't you, I apologize, but it's not a big deal anyway. That someone had just discovered that you could do the page navigation, conditional page navigating.
Oh yeah,
yeah, and I found that really interesting because we've just been speaking about like last week about keeping on top of everything, learning everything, and the fact that you literally can't. It's just completely impossible, and you'll just learn things when they just appear in front of your face. You might have seen it like 50 times over the past 2 months, but all of a sudden it's just, oh, hello, who are you? What can you do?
Always like when Radder and Patrick are like, we just discovered this thing. That's like, it's been there for like 3 years, guys. They're like, over their head is just not a part of the application they spend a lot of time. So.
I love that. It's so cool. But yeah, I mean, it's as you say, you got to go outside, you got to look at a tree, you got to get some fresh air. And this is for me the part where I had to make that decision constantly. I was like, I've got to be the best. I've got to know everything. And it was one time at work, I'd been doing something just wrong, just straight up wrong. And it was very, very inefficient how I was writing some queries. And I felt so bad. I was like, oh man, I feel like I've just been bad at my job. I've let my take. My boss was like, Ben, it's okay. Now, and you've learned, and now it's okay. And I took that moment. I was like, yeah, okay, Ben, calm down. You can't know everything.
My favorite work is always the work that I built and I don't see it again for like 6 months. And then it comes back to me and I get to look at it and I go, what were you thinking?
Yeah.
And like, it's a cool, like, litmus test of like how far you've grown during that time period, though. It's like, this is awesome to like reflect, but who was that person? And, what were they doing?
Completely agree.
Of course, we didn't leave any notes in the documentation. So,
But the fact that there was documentation is a good start, to be honest. It can be pretty special. No, I mean, for me, it's this fantasy football report that I have. I tend to come back to it every year to rebuild at the start of a new football season, soccer season, or whatever. And there'll be something in it. Like I think last year it was like the relationships and basically the structure was just like, whoa, why did he do all of this nonsense? And but it's, as you say, it's a great thing. It's like, okay, look how far I've come, look what I've learned. I think next season it'll be the visuals, because I thought, I'll do something different, I'll make it look interesting. And I opened the report like a week ago because I never really look at it, I just use it, and I was like, that is so fugly. That is just, you can't do
throw
that.
some dab on it and it'll be perfect.
Exactly. That's it. Next season it's going to be a FPL Deneb report. No problem whatsoever. We hope.
See, that's like part of the application I don't get a lot of time with is like the visualization layer.
Yeah.
And that's fine to me. Like, people should enjoy what they enjoy. I absolutely love the Power Query side, and hopefully a lot of the people here in the chat are kind of seeing me on the Twitter forums or LinkedIn, whatever else. But like, my goodness, like, what problems are people having with the application right now, and like, how can we make it better? Which I think goes like Jeff's idea or question here. What's the thing on the idea side that you want the most? It's not a single thing, Jeff. For me, it's very much, how do I get the Power Query online experience brought locally? Mo did respond today. He responded kind of within our Teams meeting. So I'll lift up the curtain here for you. I'm happy with the response that he kind of provided for us. We have been on this journey for a while. If you've used the Power Query online experience, hopefully you know what I'm talking about. It's just fantastic. And I think if I was a new user coming into that experience with kind of like the new updated icons and then some of the other things that are now there with like the query folding indicators, diagram views in terms of like doing ETL, if you're like a visual designer, my goodness, I will have so many people to Power Query everything with out in a new community that will be like, I just found Power Query today. Whew.
Yeah.
That excitement, that light bulb moment for them, that stuff is infectious for me.
I can only come. I mean, I started using it more in the past month, to be honest. I've always been very PBIX focused. So the online experiences and I immediately loved it. I didn't think I would. It works wonderfully. And also with the data marts, with the general speed, it was the icons are very helpful, I gotta say.
Yeah.
Because that was always something that was kind of a little bit restrictive, not restrictive, but you know what I mean, in Power Query Desktop. No,
Andy's calling out here now that the Mac Insider Edition now has the Power Query online experience. They beat us. They beat us to it. It's
Where's
killing
this?
me.
There you go. The Mac Insider version of Excel has a pretty sweet version of Power Query.
So if you use Mac Excel, whenever you go into like the Get Data Now, it'll pop up the Power Query online experience for the local application.
Not bad. Okay.
Yeah. So it's like, we got to get there on the Power BI side and, Excel.exe on the Windows side. But I mean, that's the vision, right? One code base that is uniform across all products. And the team can iterate in the future just on one single, code source. Like, could you imagine when they don't have to do that across 12 different products? And then just how many new things that they can deliver when they get to that state. Like, that's why I'm so excited.
I can imagine. That's actually really cool. Never thought about that. That'd be amazing. This is a random question, but actually, this when will you organize to connect live in person? That would be cool. I would love to do that. I just probably never, but it was a really cool idea. I'd like to do that a lot. At some random event, I think someone mentioned the other day, just to show at an event with a webcam and a microphone, just asking people questions as they walk by. That
would be fun.
It would be fun. I'd love to do it. It'd be such good fun. Actually, and this is a good thing as well. I've had people talking about, Power Query DAX. I need to get Melissa Coates and talk about that. And I think I was going to email her. I did email her. All of just so people, when I send in an email, and Alex you can confirm this. When I send people emails, they go to junk. So it tends to be I'll send someone an email and they'll never see it.
It was tough to get your response for sure, but
yeah,
it worked out towards the end. We defaulted to what we know works, which is Twitter. So
Twitter, yeah. Well, you're here, so it worked for sure. But it's never this. I did the first 15, 20 of them. I organized them all via Twitter, and I was like, okay, I'll just do some by email now because I don't want to make it just like the Twitter Power BI community. And from that point, it just went to organizational chaos on my side, and I was like, okay, did that person get my email? And I would email the person and say, and Twitter also, can you please just check your junk because my emails tend to go to junk, which is so professional, right? To have to do that follow up.
I'm not spam, trust me. I love Donald's question here. Is the Mac version of PQ running in cloud or just kind of the same code base? So a lot of those will be like running in a container, which you'll kind of see with the WebView.2 or is it WebView 2 for the new Power BI desktop. So like in that instance, it's just running in a local container of like a browser-based application, but it doesn't mean that you have to be online to use it. So you would still be able to run that Power Query online experience just in an offline mode. So very similar whenever it will come to Power BI Desktop, it'll be laughing at the next question, but whenever it comes to Power BI Desktop, you'll be able to do it just kind of in the offline mode. Andy,
when are you going to write a book for Pact? You know you want to.
It's not about the sell.com/pact, and that's my official response.
I got contacted for the first time that they asked me to review a book, and I was like, "Wow, I've arrived. I've made it. Now go away."
They found you. I mean, I love the work that the authors do,
of course, yeah.
which is like, hey, thank you for all the long hours here to write a book. But at the same rate, as an author, their method of doing business from like a publisher side is just like, you're putting a lot of people off here in the community. Like, just listen to a few folks. So,
yeah, I see them kicking around. Actually, do you still train for wrestling? And this is interesting because I saw someone writing the other day about starting a powerlifting community within the Power BI community. It's like a power community or something.
Well, I've never trained for wrestling. I did a lot with the brother growing up in the Attitude Era of kind of pro wrestling and Stone Cold and whatever else we were having fun with, but never officially.
Okay.
How often? Maybe I can look into it now. We've got some awesome wrestling here in my local city of St. Louis.
That's right. Yeah, St. Louis, right? Okay, fair enough. So, yeah, okay. No, I just noticed this because I saw on Twitter the other day about let's start a powerlifting community, and I was like, okay, I didn't realize there were so many powerlifting communities within inside. There you go. So this is new information. What are you gonna do?
Well, Tim McCallie from over on Twitter, he's part of Microsoft, but he is a power lifter, and then he does all of the strongman contests, and he's a Power BI guy too. So
wow,
massive jacked up guy, dragging clicky, drag drop you for bar charts. And it's like, yes, it really is for everyone.
That's class. I love it. How often do you actually get to sit down and use Power Query, like to use the product and do some awesome querying?
So this is always an interesting question for anyone on our team. Once again, I'll just invite you behind the curtain here. Like when I joined the team, the advice was find ways to stay technical. We are not always in technical roles on the Power BI CAT team. A lot of it is customer obsession. So within that, I don't do a lot of work for Microsoft. I focus on my customers and the problems that they're trying to solve. So if and when I actually do get a task for Microsoft, oh my goodness, it's very rare. So I absolutely love it. Sometimes I'll Kim Manis hits me up on an email and says, we're trying to do this web scraping thing. We can't solve it. And both myself and Miguel Lopez are on it.
Awesome.
We're just so excited to go tackle something with Power Query. Luckily, she said over on Twitter, hey, thank you guys both for just being absolute rock stars. But it's very rare that I get to use it, Ben. I would love to Power Query everything 8 hours a day, but it just doesn't happen.
Even as someone who enjoys the visualization side, I still, when I get to go into it, it reminds me of how much I love it. And you mentioned web scraping, and the web scraping is, APIs and web scraping, they are the two parts that are just
It's so fun.
absolute joy. And really the first data I was ever using in Power Query, it was local football here in Berlin where I live, and really amateur level football. And to get the data that I needed, it was just web scraping, and to take that absolute mess of garbage and turn it into something structured that I could use. It just felt amazing. It still does. I love it. It's a fantastic experience.
Web.context or contents, text out from binary, text out between delimiters. Like,
yeah,
give me all that goodness. Jeff here trying to figure out all of my passwords. Appreciate that, Jeff.
What was your mother's maiden name? Oh man, that's fantastic. Someone will fall for it one day, I'm sure. Maybe they won't, I'm not sure. That's
so
amazing.
Let me ask you, because you had said like you rarely get to kind of explore the visual canvas. Are you doing a lot more back-end stuff kind of within your current role, like helping prep the data model? Because I know that at certain points, like people like, I just don't get to that final thing maybe that you once did, because your skills have grown. They need to be more kind of upstream.
No, I think I have a good balance, to be honest. I mean, it depends on what project I'm working on. So now I'm pretty happy because I've got a good combination of hitting some nice APIs and creating pretty decent reports. Hopefully they're quite decent reports. So it really depends. Like sometimes, actually, but before this week, probably the previous few weeks, I just didn't have time to really, certainly when I got back from my vacation for a couple of weeks, I didn't actually have much time to even open Power BI at all, you know? But they are frustrating times. But no, I think of anything, I probably get less time to do some awesome Power Query work, simply because most of the data that I use is very, very structured, you know? So yes, I'll, get it with Power Query, but then I don't have to do much with it, which is it's a shame, because it's just, as I say, the most fun part. And then I do my bits and pieces, then I create my model, and then I, build out a report. So when an API comes along,
with like organizations, like some will have like titles, be like, I'm a data validation expert or a specialist or whatever the title may be, but they're still doing a lot of the other components. Like, is there a person out there who just does data flows, Power Query, 8 hours a day? Or as you've kind of said, like eventually the well dries up on unstructured data and it's just in a warehouse and it's very queryable, where people like don't need that skill set as much. I'm kind of seeing here with Jeff's comments too, where he's like, I'm doing a lot of admin stuff now, and I'm not doing as much of, kind of the things that maybe he originally found were like very interesting. But that's what's cool about the product. Like today you could be a data viz guy, and tomorrow you could be like the COE lead, or even like the admin for an organization, just like because they see your passion for it, which is always pretty cool.
I agree. I think that's certainly what I enjoy as well. I think I'd rather do bits and pieces of everything rather than focus on one part of it. I think certainly I know myself, if I did, I'd probably get bored quite quickly of just doing that. And so I mentioned I'm still working with Deneb. Yes, I'm still working with Deneb. Was using some today. And so I enjoy, I mean, the beautiful thing about Deneb now is when I see I need to create a visual that I can't with the standard Power BI visualization, I'm like, yes, it's time to Deneb. So I think I'm lucky with the projects that I work on and the role that I have, because it gives me a chance to do lots of bits and pieces. The only thing I can't do is anything that's related to premium, because I don't have it in my organization. We don't have PPU, but I have a bit of PPU in my private time, so I play with it then,
And I'm seeing that come across a lot more too, where people are just like, I'm gonna net to buy it for myself. I have it in my personal tenant too. Just I could never afford it as a 3 or 4 years ago as a independent Twitter user of Power BI. Like I had a limitation of how far I could take my skills without premium exposure.
Absolutely.
So that was another thing where I was like, I gotta find a company that has premium so I can like level up here in my skill sets.
This is, I mean, I thought it was a shame, because I really enjoy my job. I like where I work, but I want that PPU. And I was like, okay, then just, so I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything, then I'll just take it for myself. And you can't use it to the extent that you would at a larger organization, because obviously you don't have connections to all the things that you could have, but you can still use it. You can see get on board with.
But that's where we use our web scraping passion projects for our personal, the long list that we have in the back. We're like, I'll get to it one day.
Yeah, exactly. And here's a good question. I like this question. Do you often use column for examples, or do you prefer to write all the code yourself? I'll let you start that one, mate. It's for you.
I always default to UI if I can, purely from the standpoint of like, I want to experience the product as how other people experience it. Can column from examples solve the thing I need to do? 99% of the time, I would say yes. If I'm doing something pretty complex, then yeah, I'll jump into the code. But I'm all UI, and then in terms of like optimization stuff, I'll do code cleanup at the very end. But that's how I approach it.
Yeah, for me, I use it sometimes. One of the things I say all the time when I'm training, the absolute beauty of Power Query is that you can learn from yourself. You can do stuff, have no idea how it happened, and then read, and then you can learn from those snippets of code.
The VBA recorder from Excel all over again. You just click the button, and then you look at the code. I mean, that's how I did it. So.
Yeah, it's true. The column from examples, I think, is when it works, in which most time it does, it's great. And then I look at it, and then sometimes you can kind of improve it, though. There are little bits and pieces. Or if, for example, another thing I like to do with Power Query is if I forget of how to do kind of two things or a few steps simultaneously, just do the first step, second step, third step, and then, okay, now that's that, and I'm going to put them together into one step so it just looks cleaner, you know?
Yep. Well, that's where I think it was Sandeep had released a blog post earlier today where he's talking about breaking query folding with table.transform column types as opposed to transform columns. Yeah. And I was like, right there. That was just one of those UI-based things where having the formula bar, you're like, I can just make one little tweak and make this thing work. Yeah. UI, formula bar, advanced code editor. Like that should be everyone's ultimate path. Like I don't want to do more things. Don't write code by hand either if a UI can generate it. Like, oof.
Yeah. No, formula bar always switched on, and then when you make that leap for the first time to open the advanced editor and you can do it, you might be a little bit scared. You might be always copy paste. You know what I'm saying? Always copy that and put it somewhere just in case. And you do it and you go for it and it works. It's a beautiful thing. Truly,
just it is. A little undo would go a long way in Power Query, right?
Yeah, that would be good. That would be good. Power Query everything and undo your Power Queries.
I agree, Chris. I do want to Power Query everything.
It's just absolutely, it's of course, because you can connect to pretty much everything. I'm sure there's something that you can't connect to. I haven't found it yet, but and even if you can't, there's still a way to force it to connect to it. You can still sneak around it. I mean, when I first started working with APIs, it drove me crazy because I don't like the API connector. I never use it. But I can also understand that because there are so many different ways to actually connect to an API, different ways to put your authentication on. So I get that.
Can we put up Sandeep's question here? Why don't they have IntelliSense yet?
Yes, thank you. You're so good at the comments, mate. I'm terrible at them.
No. So Ben, I'm giving you two options right now as the new honorary member of the Power BI product team. You can deliver only one of these two options. Do you want to have Power Query Online, that complete, beautiful experience? Or do you want to have this one singular thing called IntelliSense fixed? You have to make this tough decision right now for this audience. And anyone in the chat, let us know which decision would you make?
IntelliSense. Yeah, I'll go in for IntelliSense. I think on a day-to-day basis, it affects more users.
So you said you like the icons of like the Power Query Online experience. That could feel familiar for like an Excel user, right? Finding the product for the first time. So they're feeling.
I can wait for that though. I think on a day-to-day basis because I use Power Query a lot when I'm writing my stuff, it's really frustrating with IntelliSense. It's wasted a lot of my time and it creates lots of errors. Whereas other stuff, I get it. It's helpful. It's nice to have. However, I think for me, it's less of a priority because it doesn't cause so many issues.
Love it here. We've got such a mixed response here in the chat, which I absolutely love. A lot of people are like, just fix IntelliSense. Of course, some people said, well,
online hands down.
And that's where I'm at. Like, I want the Power Query Online experience more than I want IntelliSense fixed because I have VS Code or I have a Notepad extension. But for me, like I want the online experience and query folding indicators, query plans. I want all that fun stuff.
I want it, but I've been waiting for IntelliSense to be fixed for quite a long time, and it does make me want to sometimes throw something out of a window when I get date or something, or it's just like really still, you know.
But I could have the Power Query Online experience deployed to like 12 different products. And then they can make all these IntelliSense fixes and all these different things, as opposed to going one by one through each one and figuring out what's broken and what's fixed.
You make a strong argument. I love it.
This is where I'm at. Like,
I disagree with it, but I like it.
And I'm like, this is what I want.
Yeah, because I know for a fact I'll be the person sitting there, oh yeah, this is great, it's fantastic, I love it. But seriously, still IntelliSense doesn't work? Really? How is that possible? Like I'm the person who's sitting there and going, oh, this is fantastic. You got data mart, you got all this stuff. But seriously, still, I can't hide drill through pages on my page navigation. You know what I mean? It's just day-to-day stuff that I think the more average user will be affected by.
Yep. I love Chris's comments here in the chat too. If you go to one code base, he's like, all right, now I see the bigger picture. Like, if you can do more things on a single code base, then yes. I do agree. Like, I didn't know how bad the IntelliSense was until people were like tagging me on Twitter. And that goes back to like our discussion of like, I don't have a lot of time in the applications these days, or the time in which I do have, I just like copy and paste all into VS Code and clean it up because I need to get this thing done to kind of move on to the next thing.
Yeah, of course. Well, I'm just going to bring this up. How about query folding, indicate advanced editor and zoom settings? Okay, so yeah.
Yeah, I'd be kind of curious in that comment. Within the advanced editor, what are you thinking there? Like at an individual, like line number 5 would tell me if this step was folding or not? Or is it purely just from like the UI perspective of like in the applied steps, I see like the icons. I'd be curious, Raphael, if you could expand on that for us.
Zoom settings is a good one though, by the way, because we had the zoom now, of course, within Power BI, nothing in Power Query. So to bring those two things together would make sense. Interesting. That was a good. I enjoyed that. I got to say.
People are asking about Azure Data Factory version of Power Query. If you've been out there recently, it does share the same Power Query Online experience that you can find in Power BI data flows, Power Apps data flows, Teams data flows. If you've ever built data flows within Microsoft Teams, similar for customer insights from Dynamics, and then Data Factory, all share that same Power Query Online code base experience.
Very cool. Basically, just to follow up on before, yes, maybe icons on the left to basically indicate query folding. Icons. This is a nice idea, actually.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've never thought about like more enhancements to the advanced editor. I would like more of like a pop me out into like a VS Code experience so I can do professional code editing development. But I don't know.
That would be cool. There's so many different ways you can improve things.
We could literally Power Query everything if we really wanted to.
We do, and we will, and we'll keep on doing it. Oh man, absolutely love it. Mate, it's been 10 minutes over the 45 minutes that I promised. It's been a lot of fun, I've got to say. I've really enjoyed it.
I appreciate it too.
I won't keep you too long. The comments, we could keep the comments will just keep on coming. Lots of ideas. We could do this, but here, this is a good comment to end on. I think I need to learn more Power Query. We all do.
Yourself. Yeah, just find a little bit of time during your working hours. Talk to your boss about how you can make this a part of your job and your growth. As an individual within a corporation, or if you're if you are self-employed, well, you got to find the time yourself. My goodness, though, yes, absolutely, learn more Power Query. I think that it has like expanded what I can do. Ben, from like you had said, like being able to connect to APIs or even just like scrape unstructured information. All of that was just like digging a little bit deeper than what the UI maybe provided you.
Yeah, open Power Query completely changed the trajectory of my career. And it's just an amazing thing. And I'm still at the point now where I enjoy it as much as I did on that day, because data's cool, right? Data is really cool, and it gives you access to that, and it gives you the ability to do so much with it. Power Query, everything. I love it. So I will say thank you, Alex. That was awesome. Everyone in the chat with all the comments always make it even more fantastically fun. So thank you for everyone, and I'll be back next week. Alex, you won't. It was very good fun, and we'll see each other at some point again, of course, on Twitter, maybe here. That would be
Yep.
cool. Yeah.
Thank you, Ben.
Take care, everyone.
Bye now.
Thank you.